Call our meeting to order tonight. Renata, if you could do the roll call, please.
Wood,
Here.
Dukin,
Yeah.
Evans,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
English,
Here.
McEvers.
Yep. Let's rise for the invocation, and we have Quanah Matheson with the Coeur d'Alene Tribe with us tonight. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, and that really sends. Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Quanah Matheson. I'm from the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, and I just want to say it's really wonderful that you invited the tribe over to say a prayer. And I always tell people too, our ancestors have been praying here for 10,000 plus years, and ancestors from a long time ago, and all those prayers are still here. And I just want to say God bless each and every one of you, and just pray along with me best you can. I'm going to use a little bit of the language that's from here, then I'll say some English. So just bow your heads with me. Amod kan klan sut en chitrom sheskunuch. Lim nas klan sut en we ulaya gut pach ba mustalanum. Went wawlen sen kwanani kwana chuna sukuna. En kwanani kwana mesent we klan sut en sila happily school lachmaske kun we te mikulam we. En kwanani kwana mesen uchne kwam squas kuset Christ to Jesus Christ. Almighty God, Holy Spirit, I'm so thankful, so wonderful that you gift each and every one of my friends and my relatives here life again, that you bless them most abundantly here today. All your children are present here today that you gave life, and I want you to bless each and every one of them in good health and happiness here at this time. Maybe they have spouses and children and grandchildren. You bless them, Almighty. You gift them a wonderful feeling of fullness and happiness, and bring your love into their life here at this time. Sharpen their minds and let their voices be strong and be heard in truth and light and love again, Almighty. And bless this lands that we stand and sit here today. It's sacred land that we all sit upon, that you made this wonderful earth just to have, to enjoy, that's bountiful and all its wonderful blessings, Almighty. And we fall short of you, Almighty, but we seek you each and every morning, each and every moment with our heart and our minds and our spirits and our souls, Almighty. Bless us today, uplift and encourage us most abundantly today. Bless this day, bless their meeting here today, that they can make a difference in the lives of the people that live here, Almighty. And you bless all the wonderful residents of this great city that sits on the foundation of the Coeur d'Alene Tribe's headquarters, that we had business and we had counsel and we had prayers here for thousands and thousands of years, just the way you put us here, you guided us here, Almighty. And this country, it grew, and we have beautiful laws and a beautiful way to live life, Almighty. You protected our soldier boys and soldier girls. They're overseas taking bullets into their bodies at this moment in time, that we can have this freedom, that we can have this joy in our hearts, and our children can be safe, Almighty. So bring them home soon. And we say, God bless this Coeur d'Alene Council here. God bless our country again. And just give us a good feeling in our hearts and our minds. And I say this in your Son's most gracious name, I pray, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Liam Lemps.
Woody, if you'd lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Don't have any amendments to the agenda tonight. We'll move on to the public comment portion. Anyone wishing to address the council on city business shall have 3 minutes to do so. Anyone wishing to come up and give public comment tonight? Okay, seeing no one for public comment, we will move on to the presentation. Our first presentation, we have the Kootenai County Integrated Regional Mobility App for Transportation. And we have Jody here. Do we have Chad?
Yes, Chad and Tim are on Zoom,
Okay.
and I believe Tim is going to introduce the item.
All right.
Yes, and I'm going to share my screen. Hello, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Tim Hibbard, and I work as the VP of Innovation and Development at Passio Technologies. We are the technology partners for CityLink North, Kootenai Health, and Coeur d'Alene Tribe's Link service. The history behind this project is that in 2019, Kootenai County submitted a proposal to the Federal Transportation Agency and won a competitive bid for an integrated mobility innovation project. My goals today are to describe how a fully integrated transportation network can better serve your citizens' needs and to give a project update and expected timeline for next steps. Planning a trip in a non-integrated environment is tricky. Each provider presents their schedule and rates slightly differently, so comparing transportation options isn't always apples to apples. If your trip happens to be longer or outside of first shift hours and therefore needs to combine multiple providers, that becomes very complicated to book using each provider's reservation system and being sure to time the transfers between providers correctly. These complications result in rider frustration and underutilization of transportation options. This means missed work, missed interviews, and missed medical appointments. Lack of transportation costs the United States healthcare system approximately $1 billion each year because of missed appointments. Mobility as a service takes all the different data sources and multiple payment channels and packages it into a single rider-facing solution. The rider enters their trip information and mobility requirements like wheelchair or service animal, and the app is able to look at all the providers and present a list of options to complete the trip. Each rider will have personal preferences in their trip selection process like cost, time waiting, or walking distance. The rider can sort the options based on the parameters that are most important to them. To build the network, transportation providers will input their service area and hours into a single system. The transportation providers are motivated to use the network because they will see an increase in riders and will be able to make data-driven business decisions based on transportation demand information for the entire region. Riders will be able to download the app from the Android Play Store or Apple App Store, or if they prefer, they can use a web browser on their computer. For individuals that are unable to use a smartphone or computer, they will be able to call into the CityLink dispatch to book a ride. We also support mobility managers. So if a workforce development center wanted to book rides for employment transportation, they could do that. Or a reservation could help a patient secure transportation when booking a medical appointment. Our apps will be fully accessible and easy to use. We have finished defining the open data standard that we will use to communicate between systems. It was important for us to pick a standard that is open so that third parties can easily access information in a known format. We are currently building the portal for the providers to input their service areas and building the app the riders will use to book trips. We expect this done by fall. Then we will enable the system to receive payments from riders and distribute those funds to the transportation providers. We expect that to be done by next spring. After that, the county will continue to grow the network to enhance the coverage across the region. My contact and Chad's contact information is on this slide if anyone would like to reach out for more details. Thank you for this opportunity, and I will take any questions at this time.
Any member of the council have a question? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Tim, how much did this cost the taxpayers?
I believe Jody can speak to the grant size and how much was a local match. I know approximately, but I will let her speak to exactly what that is.
The total grant was $150,000 with match of $30,000, so it was about $180,000.
And so, and this is probably a question for you too, Jody, and we're getting a lot of echo in here just to let the tech guys know. How long have you been working on this? And I know it's been a priority, but how long has this been working on?
We were awarded the grant, let's see, help me out, Chad, about 8 months ago. So we've been working on it in terms of the actual details of what Tim has just provided you, probably for about 8 months. Does that sound right, you guys?
Yeah, that's about what we've been working on this for. It was back then when we were notified by FTA about the grant and the real nitty-gritty work. We started that in about July, August is when the nuts and bolts have been starting to come together.
The concept we've been working on for quite a while. So that was something that we've been working on for over probably close to 2 years.
Okay, and a little over 2 years ago, I remember we asked you about this bus stop that's up on Hubbard and when it would be moved. How's that progressing?
Well, that is progressing in the sense that when we do that there was going to be a change in the, I forgot, it was Highway 95 loop bend, then that was when we were going to be doing the transportation change in terms of the city link routes at the same time, and it was postponed.
Well, just would remind you that that was considered at the time a priority for the city of Coeur d'Alene. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Dan, was that your last one?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Dan, English?
Well, it sounds like it's a good concept, but I guess I'm still, from the introduction and things, it looked like if you were in a large city and maybe multiple bus systems and all of that, things that had to be integrated, but, we can have one pretty defined system. I do know a bit about, for the healthcare and the ringer ride, and that's, handy and stuff, but I guess I'm still struggling, even though I support the concept, struggling a little bit of, that just seems like way more than who we are, so tell me otherwise. So.
Oh, well, actually, the beauty of it is really to be able to integrate all the public transportation resources that are available. So, for example, Whitetail, who provides service in Sandpoint and Sandpoint to Coeur d'Alene, we can have it where we are now integrating their transportation system in such a way that it becomes an option. So now riders will have a complete option in terms of the public transportation that's available, and they can choose then how they would like to get from point A to point B. So now we don't have that coordinated effort, and it makes it very difficult for them, people to understand what transportation options they have.
So multiple
Backing up because
geographic, oh, okay, yeah.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Move on to announcements. Any member of the council have an announcement? Kiki?
Just a reminder that the 14th of January, there is a Zoom, Historic Preservation Commission public input meeting at 5:30. So put that on your calendars, and it'll be posted on the city website with their agenda.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to remind our citizens that it is illegal to discharge a firearm within the city limits. Thank you.
Right, in case anyone was thinking about that. Okay. Good reminder. Woody, you got something?
I'm going to have to ponder that. What brought that about? Oh, so if you happen to watch these meetings on Zoom, you know the Zooms are the wide picture, just kind of one camera, and then you can look at all the little people that are waiting to talk or something. Well, Jeff and the boys in the booth back there have converted it into, theoretically, if you're watching Zoom, you will see what they show on Coeur d'Alene TV. So all the cameras, cutaways, picking your nose, things like that, will all be on Zoom now. So we're trying it. We're still working on the audio. There's some feedback issues and some little things, but it's a big step to make Zoom a little more quality. Anyway, so that's the latest from TV land.
All right, thank you, Wood. Good. All right, we will move on to the consent calendar.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, I would like to move for approval of the consent calendar, including Resolution 21001.
Second?
Motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any further discussions? Roll call, please, Renata.
English,
Yes,
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin.
Aye.
Motion carried. We'll move on to other business. We have Resolution 21-002, Declaration of Mars Company as a sole source provider for the purchase of a certified recirculation pump system. We have Kyle Marine with us tonight. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you, council, for having me. I do have a small presentation. All right, so I'm here before you tonight to present for a sole source for the Mars recirculation system. Recently, we got approved by council to purchase a meter test bench, which we thank you very much. It's been working very, very well. During that process, when we were looking at the test bench, they also supply a recirculation system. The recirculation system reuses the water through the meters that we test. So certain size meters use a different amount of water, and it goes through a tank. So we normally test 3/4 to 2-inch water meters. Those are our typical meters within the city of Coeur d'Alene. We do have meters all the way up to 10-inch. The typical use for those meters on a 3/4-inch meters are 209 gallons for a 3/4-inch meter, and then we go up to 564 gallons plus minus on a 2-inch meter. By utilizing a recirculation system, we can reuse the water, which is good for conservation. That's something that we're always trying to encourage the public to do to help utilize the recirculation system. With the recirculation system, it also comes with variable speed drives on the pump systems that helps regulate the flows and pressures going through those meters and make them more accurate for the test bench. It increases our accuracy. It helps with our database collection and across the board. And hopefully I'm not speaking too loud. It seems like it's echoing very loudly in here. When we purchased the meter and when we were looking at the test bench, we were looking at the recirculation system as well. So when we had the original design layout and we're speaking to Mars and doing our bid process for that, we had a design made up for the test bench for our existing meter test bench room. So this is the existing design for the 3/4-inch, and this is the existing design for the 2-inch. At the same time, we also did a design for a recirculation system, which adds a secondary tank, which all the water from these two tank systems that are on scales can recirculate back into this tank, go through a pump system, and recirculate back through the meters. So we had that designed at the time. The thought process was we'd go through the meter test bench, bring that to council, and move forward with it. We were in the process of utilizing possible funds for a recirculation system in the future. Our thought process was that we could build a recirculation system in-house or have a local company do the recirculation system with the software. So after we got the test bench installed and we got familiar with the software and understood it better, we started talking to our programmers. The pump system and the tanks is not the big deal. The big deal is the programming to integrate with the existing test bench. So that was one of our concerns. So we talked to our local programmers to see if we could integrate that with the system. The concern was if we did integrate with that with the system, it could fail the test bench system and make it no longer liable in court if we had an issue, and it no longer certifies those meters from Mars. It also could void our warranty on the meters. So we went back, we talked to Mars. They would grandfather last year's prices for the recirculation system. So where we didn't option to pick up that recirculation system last year, we can get it this year for the same price. So I'm here tonight to do the sole source to Mars due to the process of the computer programming software, my apologies, in the system, and move forward with the purchase of the recirculation system for $133,585. It's kind of complicated to explain the process on the electronic components for the programming, so I do apologize, but I'll do the best I can to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Kyle? Woody?
A couple. So Kyle, when we first did the bench, it was so we could test our own valves, save us a bunch of money. You guys showed a payback of, I think, 5 years?
5.5 years plus minus. It's too early to tell right now. We were expecting meter turnaround about 50 to 60%. We're actually seeing 80%. But we're still early in the process, so it's a little premature. So this first year is kind of exploratory, but so far we're getting about 80% turnaround. So in that process, we can buy parts and replace chambers and heads for the radio reads and put them back in the system for next year. So this year's budget pricing is the same as it would be if we needed to purchase all the meters because we didn't know where we were going to stand. But our process right now, we are getting about 80% back, and each year is going to be a little bit different depending on the zone that we're doing and the size of meters. Certain meters cost more than others, so it just depends.
The original plan was you guys were going to build this recirculating, using the same water over and over again.
Correct.
And that was a good idea until it didn't interface with the technology of that bench.
Correct, correct. We just wanted to, we build pump stations, we build booster pumps, so we're very familiar with that, with all the variable speed drives, the pumps, the motors, everything. We can do that part. That's not the hard part. It's the interface with the technology that's going to meet the needs and match the process that Mars puts out in their system. If we try to integrate that with a programmer, each program has their own fingerprint. So if they go in there, they think they can make it work, but I don't want to take that chance on a $500,000 piece of equipment.
So this money to bring this up to code, is this a yearly thing? Is this going to be?
This would be a one-time purchase.
One time, and what about upgrades? Do they?
Upgrades would be, we'll have an annual cost for upgrades for just the maintenance of the software,
Right.
which is considerably less.
I would
Yes.
hope so, huh?
Absolutely.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You betcha.
Any other questions for Kyle? If there are no other questions, be looking for council action.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to move to approve Resolution 21002 declaring Mars Company as a sole source provider for the purchase of a certified recirculation pump system.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Renata.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yep.
English.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, council.
Move on to Council Bill number 21-1000, approval of parking code amendments and repeal of a section of the municipal code of the city of Coeur d'Alene. Troy has a presentation for us tonight. Welcome, Troy.
Happy New Year, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much. I bring forward work that your Parking Commission has been doing for a number of months during this year of COVID. We've taken this to the subcommittee, and they had some good input, so I'd like to bring it forward. Let me first clarify the fact that none of this is new. It's actually cleanup of language and hoping to better identify what is going on in the city parking code. It's been reviewed by police, it's been reviewed by legal, it's been reviewed by engineering, and they helped me with some of the traffic triangle. So again, the Parking Commission is recommending this. We have worked with an outstanding Parking Commissioner, Steve Peterson, and he has spent time with the Parking Commission and with legal, submitted recommendations. We've modified the recommendations, and we're bringing forward the proposed changes. I sit on the Parking Commission. So in this, you will see some cleanup of language in these different sections. So the first one that we're proposing is a cleanup. And basically what it is designed to do is state that if you're at an intersection and there is no crosswalk or any lines at the intersection, you must be 30 feet back from that intersection to park. So that's wordsmithing that's in there. Downtown, our intersections typically have some type of a marking and a bulb out. And in those situations, and if there's a crosswalk, you need to be 20 feet back from that intersection in order to park. Our police department has looked at this, and were asked how many tickets were written. Last year, there was about 54 or 55, if I remember correctly, that were written. And our police chief, who is here, and I will not speak for him, but I checked in asking, how many times was there a car 28 feet 6 inches back from an intersection and a ticket was written? That does not happen. Those tickets written for parking too close to an intersection are really obvious, really unsafe, and are probably within 10 feet of the intersection. So the detail in here that we worked on was confirming that it's from every corner of an intersection, and those were words that were added. The goal in this is to create the vision triangle, which engineering has helped me with. In the event that someone is parked in an area here, this car would not be able to see around an unmarked intersection, and we can have a challenge. So that is partly the reason for this parking distance and clarifying that we want to have safe intersections for our constituents to be driving through.
We give input as we go.
Yeah.
Could you back up to that slide? A few months ago, I had asked specifically, brought to the attention that the intersection, if you picture the cross street as Sherman, and that's 4th Street going up, which is one way, but we had like a 15-minute zone for a while for people to pick up, and took that sign down, but they didn't paint the curb red or anything, and it's violating that vision triangle. I mean, cars are still parking right up to the nose of it, and so, maybe this isn't the place, but something needs to happen so that they back off from that.
Perfect example of why you can't see around a car that would be parked. This would be the one-way situation that you've referenced, Councilmember English. We wanted to clean this subsection up so that you cannot park within 15 feet of any fire hydrant. So by parking within 15 feet, you open up a spot that's basically 30 feet. That allows our fire trucks to get to that fire hydrant as readily as possible. And so that is a cleanup that already exists in the code. We just wanted to make it clear. We do not do patrols downtown on Christmas Eve, so we eliminated that from the code section just to make it clean. And finally, we confirmed what the 15-minute zones are, when it's applicable, which means only when we're enforcing it, and then we spoke to the holidays so that we cleaned it up based on what we're doing at this point in time. So your parking commission did great work on this. Hopefully this has helped, and I would stand for any questions.
Council questions for Troy? Kiki?
If you just clarify this one thing, and Dan mentioned it, these setbacks for the feet as well as for the fire hydrant are in effect whether the curb is painted or not painted.
You are correct.
Okay.
And to confirm, we're not spending a lot of effort painting curbs because it's hard to maintain, and then Mother Nature, typically this time of year, you wouldn't see any paint on curbs, but we are in a nice Pineapple Express.
Any other questions for Troy? Christie?
Well, actually, for Kenny, and I know he's here. Just real quick, Kenny, we see quite a bit, people will just be so tempted to park in front of a fire hydrant. Can you explain what happens to a vehicle when you roll up?
Well, we are very user-friendly, and we love our community, so we don't do like they do in the big cities where they knock out the windows and put the hose through. And I do have pictures of that has happened before, but we do our best to go around. Although I must admit it'd be fun to try that once, but.
Thanks.
Any other questions? If there are no other questions, we'd be looking for council action.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to dispense with the rule and read Council Bill number 21-1000 once by title only.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Roll call, please, Renata.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Aye.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Okay.
English?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
Motion carried. Renata, if you could read the title, please.
Council Bill number 21-1000. An ordinance providing for the amendment of section 10.20.010A, 10.22.100C, and 10.24.020A of the Coeur d'Alene Municipal Code, providing for the repeal of section 10.20.060C of the Coeur d'Alene Municipal Code, providing for the repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, providing for the publication of a summary of the ordinance, and providing for an effective date thereof.
And one more piece of council action.
I move to adopt Council Bill number 21-1000.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Aye.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
All righty.
English?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you, Troy. Move on to our last piece of business tonight, resolution number 21-003, Atlas Waterfront Project, disposition of the triangle piece. And we have Phil Boyd with us tonight.
And I'll tee it up, Mr. Mayor, for just a
Okay.
moment, just to give you the staff report before we bring Mr. Boyd up. You saw this about a month ago, and it is a major transaction for you. You had great input, and we get to look at some numbers that have come from that. So we're asking council, should you approve this land transfer and direct staff to draft a land transfer agreement for the entire triangle parcel to Ignite Coeur d'Alene for development and disposition, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute said agreement. That is the way in which we handled the entire bad acts piece when it went over to Ignite back in the day. And item number 2, should council condition the transfer on Ignite Coeur d'Alene, including the triangle parcel in Ignite's forthcoming Atlas Waterfront PUD Amendment number 2. And that's coming to you next month. So the timing on this is very positive to get both of those done. Council, we went to work and purchased the former Atlas Mill site, also known as the Bad Axe property, with the intent to reserve the waterfront area as public open space and develop the upland area for residential, commercial, and mixed uses through a partnership with Ignite CDA. And that public space is nearly completed and looks amazing. The city then transferred the site to Ignite Coeur d'Alene because by statute, Ignite Coeur d'Alene can more effectively, efficiently develop and dispose of property. We later acquired this triangle parcel that is the subject of our discussion tonight through a land exchange with River's Edge Development. That was a railroad right-of-way running through that property that we were able to exchange to get this triangle. River's Edge approved that, the city approved it, and a special use R34 density on the parcel would expire at this time. In addition, the city indicated to the Planning Commission that its intent in the land exchange, and if it took place, was to place that triangle parcel in the incorporated Atlas Waterfront project. So Welch Comer and Ignite have been working on this with direction from City Council. You've received the presentation on the first day of December 2020 outlining a variety of development opportunities, and you came back with excellent questions that you will get answered tonight. So one of the options was for the city to take the lead on development of the triangle parcel. Council requested that Ignite provide additional information, and you will get that tonight. After further evaluating that meeting and the presentation, it became apparent that the financial benefit to the city by taking this through Ignite and the disposition makes an overwhelming amount of sense. We're looking at the grading, we're looking at the infrastructure and all the good questions you had asked, and we have the engineer here to look at that. We've also made progress towards managing the sale of platted properties, which you've had great input on, meaning that instead of doing a large request for proposal, we would break it down to 4 lot blocks to open it up. At this point in time, we're looking at financials. There's 2 viable options available, and they are being evaluated by you, and you have the opportunity to ask the questions. Option 1 is for the parcel to be developed as entirely single-family, as a residential development. Option 2 is for the parcel to be developed as a mix of single-family residential and townhouses. When we look at option 1, it's projected to generate an additional $228,000 in land sales initially, but would generate about $453,000 less in tax increment over time based on a pro forma. That would result in $225,000 less revenue over a 20-year time frame. Option 2, on the other hand, would net a higher tax increment overall based on valuations that are put into this pro forma. So again, the triangle piece is being looked at and what it could do. We are proposing to you that triangle parcel will generate an additional $2,520,000 in net land sales revenues. Additionally, the triangle tip, the lower southern portion of that, is allowing Ignite and the engineers to reconfigure the Atlas waterfront development and create more usable land, saleable land, and a increase in density, and that is anticipated to generate an additional $1,145,000. So again, You have the opportunity to ask all those good questions. We are recommending that you look to put this into the PUD amendment for number 2 so that we can incorporate that. That will also take into effect some architectural criteria that will help keep this to be a consistent development that we can all be proud of well into the future. Mr. Mayor, I'd ask Phil Boyd to come up and share with us all the work that he has been doing for the past month on this.
Welcome, Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Troy asked me to bring the presentation because the one that was available didn't look as good. And he said, we need better quality. So hopefully now we've got it. Thank you. There it is. Okay. So I will proceed. So it's the PDF version. So the objective tonight, as Troy mentioned, was to give the council additional information so they can evaluate the triangle parcel transfer to Ignite CDA. So I'm here on behalf of Ignite CDA. Tony Burns is also here, so I can help with the technical questions. If there's policy questions, Tony can come up and cover those for you. I intend to go through and just refresh everybody's memory about the two different options. The questions we're attempting to answer for you. I'm going to talk about the financial analysis, and I'll probably start broad. If you want to drill into it, we can do into that. A couple of questions came after council meeting was what was the fate of Mount Hink? So I'm going to show some ideas that we have for that, and then as Troy mentioned, the triangle parcel PUD.
And then, Phil, you're fine with questions the council may ask anywhere?
Yes, sir, and I'll attempt to pause it, but if I don't feel...
So everyone feel free to ask questions when you'd like to.
And speaking of questions, here's the questions that I'm going to cover. Which triangle parcel generates the most revenue from a land sale standpoint and an increment value standpoint? Troy kind of hit the high points of that, and I'll show you how we calculated that. What's the value of the triangle tip? How did the cash flow model change from May of 2020 to December of 2020? Pre-triangle, post-triangle, pre-market, run up the real estate market, and then what will Mount Hink look like? So to refresh everybody's memory, I think we all know where the triangle parcel is within the overall Atlas development. Southeast Way is up here, and then the triangle parcel here is in the light blue. So the scenarios that we talked about in December, the first option was all single family, and you see that configuration here. I highlighted in blue the areas that would be subject to the hillside ordinance, which is what is precipitating the request to include this within the PUD, because we would have more flexibility if it were not within the hillside ordinance. I'll talk a little bit about that more in the next part of this. And then the triangle tip we keep talking about is down here. You see it in that area. The other option we looked at was single family along the south side and townhomes on the north side. So those were the two that we really had a lot of discussion with last month, and the question was which one generates more residual land value, sell value, and which generates more tax increment. And so I'll just jump right to the bottom line here. As Troy mentioned, we went in and we looked at the building values, we looked at the total land value, and of course I always have to have a typo in a presentation, and I'm sure the mayor caught it. Because he likes numbers, and I show it as 2018 land values. It's actually 2020 land values, so it's not 2018. That was when we first did the financial modeling. So that's 2020 land values, 2020 building values. You can see that there's estimated $3,320,000 on single family, $3,092,000 with the mix, and the difference between the two is $228,000. And then you can see the tax increment value change here, and there's $453,000 of difference there.
So that $3 million on both is the value of the land if we sold it?
If it's developed, this is the scenario where Ignite would go in, develop in either this configuration, platted, build the roads, list it for sale through the RFP process, and sell them in 4-lot increments.
So remember, it seems like what I remember about this was my brain was all stuck on getting the money paid back that we owe the wastewater treatment plant.
Yes.
So I'm looking at $3 million. It's not really, we're not going to get a check for $3 million to pay back some of the loan at some point, possibly?
Yeah, that starts to go into the policy question. Under this scenario, if you transfer the property to Ignite, Ignite goes out and sells it, they generate $3 million, and they take the $3 million and they stick it in the bank, so to speak. I'll show you a cash flow model later that shows how that revenue accrues in 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and it will show you how much money is estimated to be in the bank. And I think that's the number that the bottom line number you're after is how much revenue is the overall project generating, which in theory would be available to reimburse the city.
The whole project?
The whole project, because it's not just the triangle parcel that's generating revenue. The whole project is generating, there's another $12 million worth of revenue that is anticipated to be generated off the project.
I guess I always pictured this one firing faster because it's up above it. They don't have to wait a whole lot. The other question on this is the tip. Mm-hmm. There's some value in the tip that goes to the other. Is that included in that?
That's not in the, and I'll show you a slide on that as well. Okay. There's an additional $1,145,000 estimated. Now, and I'll throw out a cautionary note right now. As I'm tossing these numbers out, I don't want to put too much certainty on them, both on the revenue or expense side, because all of this stuff is estimates, and the market will do what the market is going to do. So that's my disclaimer on the
I get it. I think when we had the discussion, that's what it felt like. There was a few of us that I'm concerned about getting the money paid back, or at least something. We have a lot of money stuck out there. I don't want to wait 20 years. I don't think we'll be here.
Right, and I think in the cash flow model, this is going to help that situation to be paid back. The addition of the triangle piece to the project brings more revenue to the table, which would enable the debt to be paid back faster.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so this is in addition to all of the other cash flow models. And I think as Phil gets through the presentation, he'll show kind of a before and after cash flow.
Okay,
yes.
Thanks.
You bet. I don't think that there's anything else I was going to hit. Oh, I know, there was one other thing I was going to hit on this. It's a little difficult to see in here, but right up in the townhome region here, we actually have plotted in there 20 townhomes, because that's kind of the maximum we can wedge into that parcel of property. As all of us know, there's a really great set of trees all along this edge of Celtice Way, and if we jam 20 townhomes in there, we're cutting down all of the trees. And I wasn't certain that that's where we were ultimately going to head. So to make the analysis, I'll say more conservative, I took 4 townhomes out. So you'll see in the math here that it shows 16 townhomes down here instead of 4 townhomes. I'm not exactly certain we'll head in that direction. That will come through the detailed design, but I didn't want to overstate the value if we end up pulling them back out, because I think when we ultimately get in it, we may want to preserve those trees. So then the next question, which goes to the tip, is how does the triangle tip add additional value to the overall project? The area that I'm primarily focused on is this area in pink, and I just highlighted it on the after. And so if you just kind of take a glance at it and look at the street network, you look at the street network before, and there's really not a street network over here other than Atlas. There's not an east to west network. By getting the triangle tip in there, you get a more traditional street network, which just by itself is nicer for the development. So that's kind of the subjective look at it. When you take a more objective look at it, what are the before and the after? And I just decided to boil it down into units because that's really what we're talking about. Townhomes, before and after, single-family homes. You'll see in the after, the proposed configuration along Lumber Lane right here is single-family on the north side and single-family on the south side. Before, you kind of see we had kind of a townhome mixture in here. There was really not a great street network. Working through this with our land planner, GGLO, and Heartland and Hillary, we kind of looked at it and thought, that's probably the better street character is to have single family through there. That's the current thinking. It may change, but I kind of think we're all pretty like that idea. Townhomes down here on the Atlas Road, looking out onto the park. A little bit looking out onto Area 13 as well, which is that commercial parcel here in the corner, or multifamily parcel. So that's the before and the after numbers. How does it boil units, product units? How does it boil down into numbers? And again, this is just, before count, after count, before land sale value, after land sale value. What's the difference between the two? And the yellow is the additional revenue that would be generated by bringing the tip into the project. What this doesn't take into consideration, because it's a little bit hard to quantify, is how much faster the Pit 1 remediation comes online. And I think council remembers I talked about that a little bit at the last meeting. Pit 1 here is intended to be remediated, but in order to make it cost effective, what we intended to do is take the bad soils out and then wait for good soils to be produced by the marketplace and provide them a tipping place. Because contractors have to tip their soils somewhere. They pay if they go to a private place. We would probably allow them to tip it for free, but it would take us 3 or 4 years to fill that pit up. By getting the triangle tip, we can now take the soils from this area, put it up into Pit 1, and bring this area online sooner, which means it starts generating tax increments sooner. That isn't calculated in here, but I think we can suffice it to say that it's going to be a positive thing.
So, excuse me, so Phil, is it just a geography type thing is why the office retail piece was pulled out of the after?
You're back on this one down here, where we pulled out that retail commercial lot on this corner right here. It's not a geography thing, it's a market thing. And I'm taking the approach that we're not completely set on yet. On that particular corner, I have to put something in here. And so when I say we're not completely set on that, several of us are not prepared to abandon the activity we want to see on that corner, some sort of commercial, retail, something that activates the ground plane. The developers are hollering at us that it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's a stupid idea. Get rid of all retail and commercial, and all we want is residential. And they have a certain mindset. We're working on ways to stimulate activity on that corner and create something on that ground plane. And maybe it's a live-work thing, where the ground floor is your office, but you live upstairs because you're a person who doesn't want to, do your Zoom meetings from your bedroom. You want to do them from your office. There's products that could potentially be on the upper ones here, but on the corner, you still force a small 1,000 square foot commercial product that's in there. And maybe it's subsidized literally by the unit living above it. And there's a lot of that has been evolving in the marketplace. Some of it hasn't caught up here yet, but in other areas. But it's going to take more time for us to study that and evaluate it and see if there's a market for it. But it hasn't completely gone away. In the size we thought about, it probably has gone away. Okay. So this is a slide with a lot of numbers on it. And there's a whole bunch more behind it. But I boiled it down to the totals. And I'll show this to you in two ways. And some of this will answer Councilman McEver's question about revenue available for repayment. So how did the cash flow model change before with the addition of the triangle parcel? So this is May of 2020, and this was the cash flow model that was produced, and the mayor had asked for this when the transaction was occurring between Ignite and the city of the transfer of the property. I at least want to see what the cash flow looks like year after year. And so we did a cash flow model. There's sources of revenue, which are both what Ignite is putting in to the project and the land sales. So that's on the top here, the sources. And then the uses are obviously all the infrastructure costs to go build things. And so those are on the bottom. And I can come back and hit the individual lines if you'd like me to, but total, there's 27 million here. There's accumulated uses of 17 million, and the net revenue is 9.9 million. And that's what we projected in May of 2020. So then the triangle parcel comes in, and all those things I talked about earlier. What's the residual land value off the land sales? What does the triangle tip do for us? Those now come into the system here. And you can see the triangle parcel added that 3,320,000. And I've got the single family option in here. So assumes the whole triangle tip is single family. And we end up generating so that's on the sources side. On the expense side, the uses side, you'll see that that number's gone down about 3.3 million. So we've reduced our expenses, and of course the first thing you're like, how do you reduce your expenses 3.3 million in 10 months? Well, admittedly, when we're estimating expenses back in May, we don't know much from the engineering standpoint. I don't know what I'm dealing with as far as soils, market, all of those things, and so we're conservatively estimating it. And so as we move through the project and start knowing more, we get better pricing. That's one. Two, we negotiate better pricing. But three, you start to find efficiencies in the system. So you start figuring out how it's more efficient to move dirt around, how we sequence the construction. All those efficiencies have accrued, we estimate, to about 3.3 million. So land sales revenue goes up a little bit, expenses go down, and now there's about a $4.6 million increment in revenue, additional revenue. So.
On the second side, on the 2020, or the December, you're showing remediation on the pits. That wasn't in the first one, right?
It was in the first one.
It was.
It was in the first one, yeah. But again, as we started to know more, we've found a more efficient way to do it. And this one obviously envisions moving soil off at the tip and into pit one. So then moving on to the next slide. Now I've switched on you. So now before it was 2020 May on the left and December on the right, and now it's May on the top and December on the bottom. But to try to capture over time, how does the revenue change? And so 2020, we did not have any net revenue. And this is just net revenue, estimated net revenue. And you'll see in 2021, it was 2.5 million in May, and we're anticipating it's going to be less in 2021. So of course, the obvious question is, wait a second, you're getting more dirt, you have more stuff to sell, but you're projecting less net revenue in 2021? And the answer is yes, because like any good project, phase one, it is moving into the next fiscal year. We anticipated having more of it completed in 2020 and spending more money in 2020, which we didn't. So it's going to occur in 2021. And in addition, we're pulling back phase two into 2021 because I think, as you all know, there's tremendous pressure right now to take advantage of the market we're currently living in. So you push forward phase one expenses, you pull back phase two expenses, and they all accrue in 2021. And land sales probably will not close until 2022. Some of them will close in 2021, but a lot of them will not close until 2022. So you can see the big difference between May, 3.6 million, and December projection is 6.5 million for 2022.
So Phil, then what you're saying is this coming year for the performa, we would be looking at 786,000.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And again, all of this is projected on when you build things, when you close transactions. And I won't go too far down the path, but the original phase one RFP process, I don't want to say it was complicated, but we sold parcels in bulk, by a big block. There was lots of negotiation, lots of back and forth with the buyers. Ignite has decided that they're going to head down this path of selling in platted lots of 4 with a more prescriptive process, as in, here is the 4 lots you can put your RFP on, here's the DDA, here's the A&E, take them or leave them, but we're not going to sit here and negotiate for months and months and months. So we anticipate the transactions will move faster, which has a lot of benefits from it. But that's, again, we still, as Tony and I work through this, he wanted to take the approach that we don't artificially show that there's more that may close in 2021 and let's push them to 2022. Because remember, that's September of 2021 because of the fiscal year. It's not a calendar year. It's their fiscal year.
So Phil, in the December 20, it looks like the completion date has actually moved up a year. If you go to the top where the May 2020,
yes,
it looks like the final bit of revenue comes in 2025, where the December 2020, the final bit of revenue comes in 2024.
Correct.
So even though the year has been pushed back a little, the completion date has shrunk, projected by 1 year.
Correct, and I'll elaborate a little bit on that by showing you this overview. When we start getting in and moving mass quantities of earth, that's not something the neighbors really enjoy happening for a long period of time. And so as I worked through this and showed Tony different scenarios of it and how we could phase the project, the conclusion kind of dropped out that we should probably shrink the phases down. We used to have 4 phases, now we have 3 phases. And the phase 2 is the top here and the bottom down here. And phase 3 is kind of this middle corridor through here. And so the project just shrunk a little bit. There's also some economies of scale because we're not constantly ramping up the contractor and then ramping him down. We can just cut him loose and let him go. So that's why, Mayor, you see that good observation you made that we're kind of finishing the project sooner, which again brings product online, generates tax increment sooner, all those positive things.
So a couple of reality checks for me anyway. So this is projected revenue, sales. You sell a lot, you get some money. This money also, I'm worried about paybacks. Well, it's got to build the streets and the sidewalks and the sewer and the infrastructure. Is that correct?
This is the net revenue.
This is net. This is after that.
Correct.
So theoretically, this is payback.
Correct. And again, those are kind of policy questions, but this is money that in theory is sitting in Ignite's bank account unencumbered. It doesn't have it's unencumbered.
Till something happens. So are we going to get this paid back within a time, or do you see it all as one, or pieces coming back?
I think there was an original schedule, which I believe was the May 2020 cash flow of getting paid back. That will be something that we get to the end of how council would like to move that forward. I've always said that I'd like the debt paid back sooner rather than later, so that's something for council to have a good discussion on.
Okay, I think I got it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. So then moving on to the next question is, what will the Mount Hink area look like when Ignite CDA is done? The bottom left here kind of shows you what it looks like in the summertime. It's not a great looking thing, obviously, and Ignite does not intend to leave it in its current condition. One idea, the simplest idea, is to just go out there, move it around into a shape that looks slightly more pleasant than it is now, put a winding trail that goes to the top, and cover it with dryland grass seed and a gravel path that goes to the top, a couple of benches away on the way up there. And then over time, Bill Greenwood had said, well, gosh, maybe that's the place I could plant trees, different trees, because he's wanted to kind of have an arboretum where he could plant a different bunch of trees. And you guys probably know this, but Bill knows a ton about trees. So he kind of had that idea when we talked about it. So that's kind of the minimalist thing we might do there. The one that we've started to like better, because it generates revenue over time, is to process the materials into usable aggregates and topsoil. And we did this on the waterfront project, and I think I've talked to council about it before. The designers and engineers had always had it in the back of our mind, we'd love to be able to do that, but taking this theory and putting it into practice, because you really don't understand how you can easily separate those materials. So we had talked about it, could never find a solid way to bid that out. So once we had negotiated with La Riviere, we had planned to import a bunch of soils material, and I was mentioning this to Tommy La Riviere one day, and he says, you know, gosh, I'll be willing to go do that on just a test run with you. So on his own nickel, so to speak, he went in, brought in his screen down here, and he ran, I think, 5,000 yards of material for us. And so we separated out the materials. We had negotiated ahead of time what we would be willing to pay for those materials if he produced a structural material, a topsoil material, because I wanted to negotiate that before as opposed to after, because then I'm in a weaker position, which was great. We did that. So Tommy went on his own nickel, got out there, processed the material. Well, lo and behold, we generated these different materials that you see in this aerial photograph. We ended up saving about $120,000 on the park project, which of course we promptly went and spent on things we found in the soils that we didn't like and had to remediate. But it also allowed us to buy a few things that we didn't have in the original project. So this idea, I think, is really great. It lowers the height of Mount Hink. It gives us the opportunity to repurpose material that's just sitting there and doing nothing and can generate revenue over time, which again is part of the reason that we're doing the phasing. So I think, and Tony and I have talked about this in some detail, he also likes the idea, but it's just going to go over a period of time, 3 or 4 or 5 years to generate that material and turn around and sell it on the open market.
Phil, is any of that, we've talked about that it's cost prohibitive to make any of that having a buildable site on it, right, for the most part. But, I mean, we have talked about, and I think that Councilman Gookin has brought up, maybe there's a site for a fire station or something like that there, and so the city is gonna have that, we're gonna need another fire station somewhere down the road. Is there an opportunity in that Mount Hink? I mean, we have this dirt, right? If it costs us a little bit to remediate that so we could build a station there somewhere down the road, is that something that's a possibility? I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because we'd want to make sure that that's where Kenny thought one could possibly go. And there's other sites that could be studied, but I just want to make sure that it's possible that we could do something there down the road.
There's two potential sites in this area here. You can see, and this is Pit 1 to refresh everybody's memory. Pit 2 is here. Right now, we don't really show any use for an area for Pit 2. We have ideas of what it could be. We keep hearing about grocery store. We keep hearing about hotel. Maybe you put some residential here. But the road right here creates kind of this nice dividing line between residential on the west side and something else on the east side. The something else, you could just say, we want to put a fire station there, and that would be something that we would then be taking out of the revenue stream because it's no longer for sale, right? So we would lose the revenue off of it. Or we could make this parcel smaller and situate residential on the ledge over here, the ridge, because this has a view, because you're looking over and you could put the fire station here, or you could look at remediating this pit. Again, as we start to know more and figure out how efficient we are at processing the material, how much market there is for it, it may be possible to remediate Pit 3. Pit 4 is the one that's really, really deep. Pit 3 is not as deep. So I guess the answer is, Mayor, that's up to you all and Ignite if that's what you'd kind of envision for it to happen here. But it's feasible.
And this is somewhere down the road, and if we talk about Pit 3, for example,
Yep.
and Kenny, you could just nod your head, about an acre of ground is needed for a fire station. Would that be, and you can nod your head again, yes, or you can shake it no, is that something that you want to look at down the road as a possibility? Is that a site that, okay. So Pit 3 could be remediated at some time in the future to accommodate that, if that's a decision. But what I want to make sure is that we're not closing the door to that in anything that we're doing.
And I think that's the beauty of this idea, is that we're processing material as we go. We're creating structural materials. If we end up, we have ratios of what we think when we create topsoil, unsuitable, and structural soils. if we start creating a bunch of structural soils and we're stockpiling in here, it could be cost effective to say, well, let's not sell the structural materials. Let's remediate pit 3 with the structural materials and keep it for ourselves. And now you have a saleable piece of property, or you have the opportunity to build a fire station in that area.
And Dan, I don't want to, that was your idea, and you had brought it up, but I don't want to say anything on your behalf, so, but I just wanted to make sure that we all knew that that was an option moving forward.
Appreciate that so much, Mr. Mayor, because that was something that I've discussed, with fire department, with a school district. We have space here to put a school in. These are needs in the community, and I know the goal is to repay us. So we want to repay the city. But I'd like to think that we're not all just motivated to be continually planting houses. We did take the most expensive part of the Atlas Mill and make it into a park. So, I would like to think that kind of commitment to the community would extend elsewhere.
And I think that from just a land use standpoint of where would you put a community facility, it's called Area 11 on our land plan. Area 11 over here is a logical place to put a community facility if you're going to put one of that type, whether it's a school or a fire station, just because of the accessibility off of Celtice Way. So yes, I think those are all in play. And currently, we don't have Area 11 programmed for anything yet.
And that whole area, that when we're talking about pit 3, pit 4, that's the final phase of that, and we're talking, that's a few years down the road.
Correct, and that's why this area down here, on the north side of Lumber Lane, Area 7, it will be one of the last to be sold, because we're going to be doing things up here, and we don't want neighbors calling Troy and asking him about those things.
So again, just want to make sure that those options are still on the table for decision makers down the road.
Correct.
Well, as long as we have a wish list, Mr. Mayor. Pit 4, I love the idea of the trees, and those trees could be somewhere on the round side of a baseball field. Wouldn't you agree?
And I didn't ask Christy to bring that up.
No, I mean, a baseball field for the community and for the college would be outstanding, but down the road.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We've actually laid in a baseball field in there early on in the process. And so, yes, all those things are potential up there. A baseball field will fit there.
And as long as we're just mentioning, just that but I mean, there's always trade-offs. So, yeah, we could get it together and sell that piece off. But if down the road, and we know we're going to have another fire station, and if that makes sense or something, but chances are nobody's going to give us the land for the new fire station free wherever it is. So it has value to us either way. And if it's a potential site for a school district and we can give them a good, fair price and it's in a spot, I mean, so it definitely, even if it's in our hands, it has a trade-off value of some other expense we'd have, so.
Good point, yeah.
I guess when we talk about school districts, they have minimum sizes.
They do.
And I think the minimum size for even an elementary is it 10 acres now?
It's 10 is what they prefer,
Yeah. So that's probably not a site that's something like that.
But Phil, when you talk about lowering Mount Hink by using some of the dirt, I like that idea, just because I did hike up it one day. I think I called the mayor and said, could you send Life Flight? Because that is steep. And so I don't know if you're going to put trails up there. They're straight up. So you talked about moving it around and.
Yeah, so in the minimalist approach, if we weren't to go process the material and we would just leave all the material there, we would reshape it in a way that had probably we would attempt to make a ADA grade trail all the way up. So even if you were in a wheelchair, and granted it would be gravels and it would be compacted, so you'd probably need someone pushing you, but we would make an ADA trail all the way to the top, so it would go round and round and round and round and round. So it would be easier, and there would be places to stop and rest and look at the view. But
and maybe
yes.
a gondola so you could take
that's
your bikes up and ride them down.
Now you're messing with the pro forma, so. But if you've been to it, Councilmember Wood has been to the top of it, and a lot of you probably have, but it's a beautiful view from up there. You're looking out over the river, and it's really a fantastic view. But there's also a lot of resources that are sitting there, I don't want to say being wasted, but probably not being used to their highest value. And to us, to me, I think there's a lot of value in repurposing things if we can and putting them to good use and generating revenue off of it.
So all options will be on the table in the future.
Yes, sir.
Bill, just one more thing. So I had never heard about 11 much, because theoretically it's paid for, and the payback is without it. Is that correct?
No, the area 11 is in our payback. It's in, so this area right here, area 11 is in these numbers.
It is.
It is in these
And
numbers.
used for what, development of homes and more, is that the way it was projected?
It was, and I'm trying to remember the number of homes that are in there. There was, I want to say there was 24 single-family homes, something like that in there. Which, again, from my standpoint, that's not a great use of that spot because it's not a super desirable
But
place to live.
it's in the numbers here.
It is. You have to make decisions on, early when you're doing these things, you have to decide what you're going to put in there. And we had a bunch of different scenarios you can put in there. You can put a grocery store in there in the development standards. You could put in single-family townhomes and I think commercial retail. There was no multifamily allowed there. But we had to pick one for the financial model.
It should be interesting to see the difference if you pull that out and do it for community and things like that. Is the impact real big? Is it 2 years, 3 years on the payback? Maybe I'm pushing too hard on the payback.
No, you're not.
I think there's room there when we calculate what the debt is, and if you get out to, just in the numbers that I have in my head, you get out to that $14 million number that's in 2024 there, that will more than pay off the debt, and there could be a couple of nickels left over.
Build a fire station.
Could be some, could be something. But remember now, those are all projections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Dan, I'm
I
sorry.
do have a question. This is not on the money or the payback or anything, but you did mention earlier on in your presentation, or maybe Troy did, no, you did. And it's something I have a frustration over, which is the hillside ordinance. Should I mention that now, or will we wait for the PUD for me to unload on that?
Maybe you're giving me the segue into the PUD, because that's what
We didn't rehearse this.
No, we didn't. No, we didn't. Yeah. We're segueing into yes, we're segueing into it now. So, as I mentioned before, the hillside ordinance will impact all these lots in here, because you can see the steepness of them. This is the existing topography. The future topography will be different. And the reason it will be different is because we want to make the properties more saleable. This has a very steep slope here, then it goes flat, then it goes steep again.
I can't see the cursor on the screen for some
Sorry,
reason.
yeah, it's,
Giant one on there?
yeah, it goes away. So it's over here on the south side of Jammer Lane. So these lots that are on the west side and moving through here, these are the ones that are gonna have the most earthwork done to them, where we're gonna actually take some of the material down here from the tip and move it up there to make the lots flatter and more developable. In the process of doing that, though, the hillside ordinance gets in the way. And I won't necessarily go into all the details unless you want me to, but it just makes it more of a challenge. Also, the lots, the size of the lots would need to be bigger. The treatment of the trees, all those things would need to, we would be kind of wedged into something and we wouldn't be able to create what we're showing here. The position that Ignite's in, and I'll say I'm in, is assuming the PUD is approved, there's still values that are within the hillside ordinance that will reapply to this hillside. So if we take out a bunch of trees, we're gonna go back in and put trees in as the developer, and then we're gonna protect those trees through the platting process. Because we don't wanna put in a tree and then have somebody come in and buy the lot and cut the tree down. And so we'll put some of those things in as part of the plat in order to achieve some of the goals of the hillside ordinance, but if we have to do it per the hillside ordinance, it straitjackets us too much. So that's the reason we're asking for the PUD.
Woody?
So what's the crimp on the hillside ordinance? It's been a while since we've ever even mentioned it.
Well, I can tell you, because it's, so it's a concern, because the hillside ordinance, were you here when they passed it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking.
So it's a big deal, big fight. And it sounds to me, what I fear would be that we're looking at a way to kind of pierce the veil on that and kind of do an end run.
It's kind of an end run, but the
called a
difference
variance.
is that the entity that is doing the end run is a public entity that one of our values is different than if we were just a capitalist, a pure capitalist in this deal. And I know that maybe you don't, I can understand your hesitancy when I say that. But honestly, there's lots of things in the hillside ordinance that we're going to put on top of the developers anyway. We're just going to do it as the master developer.
I want to see that language. And a question for Mr. Gridley that you're totally unprepared for. Thank you. If we do this, do we set a precedent that someone can come back and accuse us of something if we're messing with it? And I don't even know what degree yet. We're just talking about it theoretically. So I don't know if that helps you.
Question, whether you can mess with things or not, is that?
Well, no, I mean, if we do, and I don't know to what degree we're considering altering the hillside ordinance. If we do that, does that mean that you have a developer who's going to come in who has a tight property like they had up on Potlatch Hill and come back to us and say, whoa, you guys, you can't change the rules just for you, and then tell the rest of the public, I mean, rules should be rules, right? Or are they?
I think typically you're bound by the rules that are in place at the time you do your development, if you want to come pull a building permit. And so, usually we would have rules that apply to public and private in those instances. But council can review the rules and change them as they see fit.
You're true.
Yeah, and I believe Hillary would like to add.
Hillary's jumping out of her chair.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So just a clarification, so the hillside ordinance allows for deviations anyway. So that's a tool that is available for us to do through the PUD process. So there's minor deviations and there's major deviations that are allowed for a development. The other thing that's unique with this is different than other parts of the city that are, along the perimeter where it's truly hillsides and where we have the steep slopes and where the erosion. This is just kind of a weird pocket that just happens to be within the atlas. As the hillside ordinance is written, I forget what date it was, but it was kind of after such and such date, anytime anything gets annexed in, and now it's subject to the hillside ordinance if it has that 15% or greater slope. And so it's kind of an anomaly, honestly, that this is just this little sliver of the Atlas project that falls in the hillside ordinance versus our true hillside areas in the city. Hopefully that.
For the next meeting when we do the PUD and we can actually get into this, I'm sorry for derailing it. But can you make sure that a copy of the hillside ordinance is provided to us or included in the packet so that we can review that?
We can do that, and point of clarification on that too. So the PUD amendment is going to Planning Commission, not to City Council. So we can certainly
and then it'll never come to us if no one objects, right?
That's just how the PUD process works.
Even if the PUD overrides the hillside ordinance, it doesn't come to us.
Correct, because how the code is written, it allows, like I mentioned, the deviations.
When was the last time I said I don't like PUDs? Because I want to say it again now.
Don't like PUDs.
Thank you.
Hillary, could you just briefly explain the main purpose of the hillside ordinance? The hillside ordinance is there to what?
Well, it's really just to protect the hillsides in general. So as looking at kind of, again, especially the east side of the city, and then in the future, potentially the south side, just really to protect the integrity of the hills. So to retain the trees, to make sure that we're not creating landslide hazards, things like that. The visual impacts as well. That's why there's the colors that are kind of in there. The reflectivity is part of the code. So all of those reasons. And so it really is a very important code. And so staff doesn't have any intent of trying to undermine it. It really is important for us. But this is such an odd application of it within Atlas. So
I don't want to accuse you of undermining it. That's not where I'm going. I just want to make sure that if we do something, we're not creating a situation down the road where some developer can come to us and say, hey, I want to do this, and we're like, well, no, you can't because of the hillside ordinance, and then they point to this and say, well, wait a second, you guys are being arbitrary.
Right, and so the city and Ignite, we're not doing anything that anyone else wouldn't be allowed to do through the code currently. So there is the deviation process through there that is allowed, and then obviously if it was something egregious, I would think Planning Commission would say, yeah, that's not really an appropriate application of the hillside code if the whole slope is 15% or greater, and there's
But-
issues with it.
But the intent, at the end of the day, when it goes through the PUD, is that hillside standards will be upheld.
Correct.
There just be some deviations. I mean, you don't want the erosion, you don't want the hillside to be falling down below, or also, everything will be followed. There
Right.
could be just some deviations to the
That's correct.
hillside ordinance.
Yes.
And another question, so, I don't know, I mean, I see the topography map, I assume, Phil, those are 5-foot increments in those lines?
1 foot.
Those are 1 foot, oh, it's not as terrible. Do we allow, like, houses on stilts like you see in California? Is that something they could do here? Or we don't
Depending
wanna
on
do
if
that?
it can be engineered, and so that's one of the things the hillside ordinance requires, that you have to do the geotech study of the site
Okay.
and figure out what is suitable, like how, how should it be constructed to make it work. But what Phil is saying is, if approved, and if this goes through the process, that those lots that are most impacted by it will be able to do some grading and stabilization of that and make sure everything is good, still do the geotech, as he mentioned. It's just in a different fashion. So I think if it goes as planned, we wouldn't have to have houses on stilts. I think they would be able to just take advantage of the grade of the lots.
And are we allowed to watch the planning commission meeting? Because I'm going to do it anyway.
Question for legal? I guess if you disclose it, if it comes to you, to say that you watched it, so that everyone knows, right?
Thank you.
I think that's the key, is giving full disclosure of what information you might get outside the presence of the rest of the council.
Thank you.
Dan, English.
Well, and then, a couple of comments, one to Councilman Gookin. I mean, I would say from lots of experience in government bodies and stuff is, no, of course, we cannot guarantee that somebody's not going to come down the road and say, that'd be like saying, can we guarantee if we do something, nobody's going to sue us over it? It's like, no, you can't guarantee that. I can pretty much guarantee they'll try. And if we, every action we take, somebody could try to say, well, you did this and that. So, I don't think we should do something or not do something now because somebody might use it they're going to try to get an advantage down the way they do what they do. If we did what we did on good grounds, then we got to keep, moving on with things. The other thing is, with the whole PUD, I have a mixture of comfort level on that, but kind of in my layman's terms is, it is a way, I mean, we have standards and rules in place, but then we also have ways to, maybe you'd call it, get around them or get creative to where, again, trade-offs that, if it was hard and fast, you couldn't do this. However, there might be a greater good. I mean, the whole point of the whole thing is for public good and protection of things. And so, there might be calculated trade-offs that some body, and in this case, I guess the Planning Commission decides, well, those kind of trade-offs can be worth it, and you're still going to have boundaries around the whole process. So it's not like, we're not wiping it out. So anyway, my 2 cents. I have a nickel's worth. I was just flashing back, in the 80s, we had a waterfront ordinance, didn't we, about so high or how close to the water you could build. And I was either on planning and zoning or sitting up here with the very ultra-conservative days when the hillside ordinance came. And as I recall, if it was P&Z, the hillside thing, as I recall from internally in the council, was about sewer and water. The only way you could build on a hillside, you had to have sewer and water to be in the city. And that was like, in those days, I don't think we had many lift stations and all the things it took to get that stuff up there and then water to supply it. So I remember it being as something to try and maintain what we have. You look east and there's no lights on the mountains, I mean, it's still forest. And that's what I remember about the hillside ordinance, that was really kind of the deep force behind it, to say, here's the only real game we have, water and sewer. And if we don't go there, they aren't gonna build there. Does that ring a bell to anybody that's been here, Steve-O?
I'm not that old.
We're all just kids, Woody.
Woody, you mentioned the shoreline ordinance.
Yeah.
And so the city had a shoreline ordinance. Well, what happened to that? You know, is it so far back from the water, so high?
Right, right.
Well, we killed that through the PUD process as well. So while we had shoreline here, there, and everywhere, it was just every time something came in right on the water, and there's really nothing left to come in on the water, but every time something came in on the water, they'd have a PUD that would kind of wave that or brush it aside.
Well, it's supposed to be a trade-off, something for the
Yeah,
public
well,
was supposed to get something, the walkways, the, you know, all
Yeah, I really
the-
think the only people who got anything were the developers, so that's.
Not
my
on the
opinion.
Ed corridor. Just saying.
What?
Not on the Ed corridor, just suggesting that that was done right with public access.
Well, and the resort was a
Getting a
big
little
trade-off,
off
and we got the
Right.
walkway around it, right? That was a
Right.
big deal, having the boardwalk. I mean, that was some of the trade-off, as I recall, some other public, public gets something out of it, as I recall. So I
No.
guess,
Mayor Woodmark, could I add a little bit of history to Woody's comments? Because
you
I
remember?
was here, and we did do a moratorium on hillside building, which was pretty controversial because it prohibited, stopped all construction. And the reason was, do you remember the Marvin Erickson's Z up on the hillside, up on Canfield? Cut in a road that you could see from the Spokane Valley almost. So that had some people wound up about that. And then it was actually behind Fernan up on, I forget what it is, somebody was trying to build a house kind of on stilts and extending out, and they started digging a garage back under our road, and the road collapsed and slid down the hill. So I think those are two things that, because to do the moratorium, we had to demonstrate some emergency or some imminent danger. And I think those were two instances, or at least the slide of the road, that as construction was being done in hillsides, public property, public infrastructure was being endangered. So that's where it started, I think.
that's cool.
Christie?
Thank you. Well, if we're done with the PUD, I wanted to go back to the tax increment. And Phil, really what you've shown us is short-term versus long-term. And for me, I honestly thought, my mind was made up that I wanted to see single-family because I thought there'd be more tax increment with that. And these numbers show something different. And I do understand their estimates. We don't have appraisals, but I think that Ignite's done their due diligence. So I'm more of a long-term person, and so I like to plan for the future, and so it looks like option 2 actually is better long-term planning.
It is in this illustration. I think one of the things, and I know I skipped over offering this up to council. Our intent would be to put the RFP out in both ways for that parcel over here. So the RFP goes out and says you can make it single-family homes, or you can make it townhomes. Developers make a proposal to us.
Okay.
And if the proposal comes in and the single-family numbers are off the charts, and we look at the product that they're proposing, because remember, that's part of what drives increment, is the value of the product. It could be that, gosh, that really looks like the better deal overall, both in the short term and in the long term. And as the steering committee, which you're part of, you all can make those value judgments and say, gosh, that's really important to us. We'd like to head down that direction. Or you may say, gee, the townhomes, it's pretty close, and we'd like to see some other product type in the neighborhood, and that might come out. So our intent is to put that parcel out in both ways and let the proposals come in from the developers and see what shakes out.
Well, it's helpful for me, sitting on the committee, knowing what council would like to see, so that I can carry the voice of council. So I'll just ask for input.
Phil, I have lost track.
Okay. So I'll just skip to the end and say thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.
Did you get all the way through your
Yeah,
presentation?
I did. The last question, or the last thing on the PUD, and I can just hit a little bit about it. Other than the hillside ordinance, we're just intending to try to match the requirements that exist and the advantages that exist in the other part of the development. But also back to one of the comments that Councilmember Buchan made about houses on stilts. We're gonna have architectural standards that will control what can happen on that hillside.
Thank you.
And so, because the other thing, the other trick that happens is, well, I won't put my house on stilts. It's really on stilts, but then they put this facade that's 52 feet tall, and you see this gigantic
Like
wall of
great
siding.
wall of death.
Yes, and so there's lots of ways that builders can try to skirt the requirements, and we intend to narrow the lines on them so we don't have something obnoxious anywhere in the project.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
A couple of just quick ones. So on option 2, which is, you're saying it's a kind of a single family and that, and then see what they're interested in doing. Are those sold in blocks or are they sold individually?
These
How do
would
you see that?
probably be sold as one big, if it were to go townhomes, we would probably sell that in one big block.
The townhome side?
The townhome side, because I think, as you know, you can see the discontinuity that can occur if you had 4 different sales there. And that's kind of off the top of my head. We're just starting to get into the RFP creation process. And so we'll have to think through exactly how we're going to do that side. This other side would already be platted, so to speak. The lots would be figured out where they're going to go, and we would sell them in blocks of 4.
Individually? Oh, you would sell them more than one?
The intent is currently to sell them in blocks of 4. Yeah, because I could go on for a half an hour on how we came up with that, but that's the.
Thank you.
Yes, I'll
And
leave it there.
One other thing, when you took out the commercial, I was thinking about how many homes this is going to be like a giant housing development, and there's no grocery store, you're thinking about from the public side on the beach and have someplace cool to go hang out, and I'm looking at all these people going out on Saltese out of 2 ways, or I guess they can go into Riverstone to go grocery shopping or go to the store to go get something. Is that in the, do you guys think about that?
Absolutely, and just as a refresher, down here on this is area 12, on the west side, right down in the south or west corner, there's commercial that's required down there. And so there is a commercial node that's going to occur down there. The developer is so adamant that it's not feasible for them. They've come back to us, to Ignite, 2 or 3 times and said, can you please relax that? And we've said no, because it's such an important feature that we want to activate that ground plane and have something there. And we've suggested, and Hillary's been great at this as part of our team, suggesting ideas to them that they have been, hey, that's not such a bad idea. Same thing with over on Area 13. They've asked to be relieved of the commitment of their obligation to have something on the ground plane there. So the intent is to have commercial, retail, restaurant on those 2 nodes. I think as the neighborhood starts to go up, the demand for that might also go up. This corner here is a little bit challenging because there's not a lot.
I can't see which corner you're
It's the corner of the southwest.
I saw a mouse.
Of Veneer Road. This one right
It's
down
like
here.
very tiny,
Yes, it's very tiny, that.
right there.
Yes,
Okay.
right there. And so that one's just kind of a hard spot. The other commercial one is right across the street, and you see this big building on the east side of that road. There's commercial that is there as well. So there's still pockets, and then finally Area 11, the one on the top, the potential for something to occur up there. And maybe that's a mixed-use product, because if you were to go up, if you were to put retail on the ground level and then go up from there, you can imagine the views on the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th floor of those buildings. So there's still opportunities, and we have not let it go, even though what we constantly keep hearing is, it just should be residential. Just make it residential and we'll sell it like mad. Well, that's because it's easy, right?
That's what I was going to ask you. Do developers, we hear the bad developers, they come in and make their money and they're gone. I think residential's easy. You sell it and you're done. Commercial can become a whole nother thing. That's the guy who has to manage commercial, let alone be an owner of it. I guess it's a different mindset.
It is, and we're trying to encourage that to happen, and we're sticking to our guns. It was a value that we heard early on. You're repeating it back to us again, and so we've tried to stick to our guns there. Not unilaterally, we're moving towards the developers and trying to find ways to help them working on parking, and I know that's a hot button for you, but helping them with parking and helping them with site design and doing other things to.
You just might have to find the right developers. Maybe the guys who build homes aren't good at anything else, you know?
I did hear, Woody, you asked about a grocery store, and I don't know and we don't know what goes in, but I had heard there was a grocery store that was being planned. I don't know if Troy, if you've heard anything about this for Celtice and Atlas.
Oh.
I'd heard there might be something. I mean, we just did a vacation there. They're going to build something, and I had heard the rumor mill that was going to be a grocery store.
I think it's a C-store.
Yeah,
Is that what kind of
I
store?
think it's like a gas station
Right.
C-store, I think, at the
that is
corner of Atlas.
So it's a
and-
convenience store.
and Celtice.
But they don't have one of those out there already, so.
Yeah. I think we have to be a
Open beer.
little careful, and commercial is market-driven.
Right.
If you have a commercial space, you have to have customers, even though we say to me, that's not massive, right?
Really?
There are a number of, but you're not gonna build a grocery store for the people that live
Right.
there.
Right.
If you build a grocery store, you're gonna have to depend on thousands of customers coming from elsewhere. So that's why commercial is something that has to be carefully planned, because if you over-commercialize, you're going to have vacant spaces.
Right.
Or you're gonna have spaces that turn over a lot. You have someone in there for 2 or 3 years, they can't make it, right? Then the storefront's vacant for a year or two. You have somebody else, it's the turn and burn. So commercial has to be very carefully planned. And I know, I question some of the commercial in there. I listen to some of the folks that are smarter than me about how much commercial should go in there, but you got to hit that sweet spot of how much is enough to serve that area. And
Survive.
that's going to be, even the commercial as you get closer to the waterfront, right? I mean, that's off of the beaten path. It's not something, there's a reason why people have built on 95, on Ramsey, because you have all those traffic that goes by there and people look, oh, I need to go in there. Well, that you're not going to have a lot of traffic if you're having something inside that development where that's going to resonate with people that they need to go there. So I agree that commercial is an important part of the project. The big question is how much.
And somebody has to make it stay alive.
Got to pay the rent.
We've been through it in the 80s. Downtown was pretty vacant for a while there, so.
Well,
it's a
and
cycle.
when we were going through this planning on that, especially the waterfront piece, the mayor's just spot on. It seems romantic to come up the water, off the water, go to a restaurant. But, Riverstone has difficulties many times with their restaurant crowd. So how do you, in this housing development, make something thrive? So it's going to be tough to stick
And there's
to.
going to be, with any commercial space, there's going to be trials and errors. There's going to be people that go in there and it doesn't work, right? There's going to be people that come in there and it flourishes. So you kind of build off of what works and what doesn't. And as someone, and Woody's probably done that too, you've probably stared out the window waiting for customers a few times. It's not a great feeling.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Dan?
Going back to the task at hand. So when the motion that's been pre-written for us is to approve amendment number 2. Can I have just a brief summary of what amendment number 2 is?
So are you referring to the PUD?
Oh, it said to be included, but we are approving the transfer of the triangle piece. Do we need to make any other decision regarding the A and B that were presented, the 1 and 2? That's what I'm kind of confused by. What do you want from us?
I think what the request is does the city want to transfer the triangle parcel to Ignite for development and disposition in either 1 or 2, the option 1 or option 2 configuration?
Not amendment number 2.
Then
option 1 or 2.
the second part would be, because we're submitting our PUD application tomorrow, and Ignite is not the landowner of the triangle piece, the city needs to affirmatively say, and we want to include our piece of property, Ignite, with you in your PUD application.
We seem to have them in quite a pickle then, don't we? Anyone want to build a casino there? Because it just popped in my head. I thought that would be fun.
The money.
No, second? Okay.
Yeah, so I think I captured it correctly, Troy.
Other questions? Kiki?
I'll just mention, and to follow up, Christy, with your question, I think my input would be that I'm supportive of that option 2 version as well, and I think that's what people are wanting, is a bit more of a mixed use. I brought up that question about commercial because I have heard that for a long time about, there needs to be a commercial piece in there, but it sounds to me that there are plenty of options for that, and then the market will drive whatever that commercial piece will be, and it's not being totally eliminated. I also wanted to say, I think the production of the material in Mount Hink is the smartest way to go. Being able to resell and resource that material will make the land more valuable, generates revenue in the meantime, and the land could be sold or used for us and leaves all the options on the table. So that would be my input on for that. I think the neighborhoods, the mixed use, and leaving most of the options available that we've talked about is getting council, for me, getting me where I think the citizens want that parcel to be.
Other questions? Amy?
Well, I just want to say thank you. I know you guys have been working on this a ton, and I had a conversation with Tony about it, and so I just appreciate all the work in getting these numbers in such a short amount of time. To give Christy some feedback too, I'm in favor of option 2, and primarily because of what we heard from the community, over the several workshops that we held with them, and them requesting various housing options. And so I would like to stick as true to that as we can. I know that we're just talking about the triangle piece right now, but I'm happy to provide that feedback. Thank you for carrying it. So.
Any other questions for Phil? So if not, is someone ready to make a motion?
I am, Mr. Mayor. I would make a motion to approve resolution number 21-003, approving a transfer of the triangle parcel to Ignite CDA with the condition that the parcel to be included in Ignite CDA's Atlas Waterfront PUD Amendment number 2, and to direct staff to direct a land transfer agreement with Ignite CDA authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute such agreement.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion. Dan?
So, Mr. Mayor, I have no problem with transferring the property to Ignite. I mean, they're the best equipped to develop it. I do not like townhomes, just want to say that for the record. No one moves to Coeur d'Alene to move into a townhome. You'd think smart people would talk to realtors and know that.
And you don't like PUDs either, do you?
PUDs I don't like, and I will be doing a rant about that later on my YouTube channel.
And the hillside ordinance.
Any further discussion on that? If not, a roll call, please, Renata.
Miller?
Aye.
McEvers?
Yes.
Dugan?
Yeah.
English?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.